On a night in 1568, on the southwest coast of India, a queen crept out of a burning mosque with 200 soldiers behind her. Her city had fallen that same day. The most powerful navy on earth, the Empire of Portugal, the empire that had bent half the world to its will, had taken her capital, marched into her palace, and declared victory. They should have known better. By morning, their general was dead, 70 of their men were prisoners, and the Portuguese were running for their ships. The queen's name was Abbakka Chowta. For nearly 40 years, she did something no king in India had managed. She beat the Portuguese again and again and again. She may be the first woman to ever fight a European empire on Indian soil, 300 years before the Rani of Jhansi. And almost nobody outside her homeland remembers she existed. This is her file. To understand her, you have to understand what everyone was fighting over. In the 1500s, the wealth of the world was spice, pepper most of all, and much of it grew on this narrow strip of the Indian coast. Whoever controlled these ports controlled a river of money flowing back to Europe. And by Abbakka's time, the Portuguese controlled almost all of it. They had cannons, ocean-going warships, and fortresses. They seized Goa. They took Mangalore. Town after town along the coast simply paid them tribute because the alternative was to be burned to the ground. Then they came to a small kingdom called Ullal, and its queen, and for the first time, someone said no. Abbakka belonged to the Chowta dynasty, who ruled this Tulu-speaking coast. They were unusual. They were Jains, and they followed a matrilineal system, where the crown passed not from father to son, but through the women of the family. Abbakka was trained for rule by her uncle, trained in warfare, in statecraft, in the handling of a bow. And when she took the throne of Ullal, she built something remarkable for any age, let alone the 16th century. Her court and her army were made of every faith on that coast, Jains like herself, Hindus and Muslims standing side by side, Hindu Bilava archers, Mogavera fishermen who knew the sea better than any admiral, Biri Muslim oarsmen who rowed her warboats. She united people the rest of the world insisted should be enemies, and she pointed them all at the empire. The Portuguese demanded what they demanded everywhere: bow and pay us tribute. Abbakka refused, not once, as policy. She would not pay, she would not bow, and she would not stop trading with whomever she pleased, Portuguese permission or not. To an empire, this was intolerable, not because Ullal was large, but because defiance is contagious. If one small queen could refuse and survive, others would ask why they couldn't. So they came to make an example of her. In 1555, an admiral named Dom Álvaro da Silveira sailed against Ullal with soldiers and guns. He expected a quick lesson. Instead, Abbakka drove him off, and that was only the beginning. Attack after attack broke against her over the years, until the Portuguese themselves gave her a name that was half curse, half salute: Abhaya Rani, the queen without fear. By 1568, the empire had lost patience. The Portuguese viceroy sent a general named João Peixoto with a full fleet and one order: end her. This time it worked. At first, Peixoto stormed Ullal, took the city, and pushed all the way into the royal court itself. Abbakka was forced to flee her own capital and took refuge in a mosque nearby. To the Portuguese, it was over. The queen was routed, the city was theirs, and they settled in to celebrate. That was their mistake. That very night, Abbakka gathered around 200 of her soldiers in the dark and led them back into her fallen city herself. What followed was chaos in the Portuguese camp. A queen most of them thought was beaten, cutting through them in the dark. General Peixoto was killed. 70 of his soldiers were captured. The rest broke and ran for the coast. By dawn, Ullal was hers again. And legend says she fought with Agnivana, arrows tipped with fire, raining down on the ships as the empire retreated. Abbakka understood something most of her neighbors didn't. No single kingdom could beat the Portuguese alone. So she did the patient, unglamorous work of building a coalition. She reached out across the whole of the south, to the Zamorin of Calicut and to the Sultan of Bijapur, rulers of different faiths and rival ambitions, united only by a shared hatred of the Portuguese chokehold on the sea. Together, they made the empire bleed for every mile of that coastline. For a moment, it must have looked like the impossible was within reach, that a queen from a small city had found the formula to push a European empire back into the ocean. But empires do not lose to strength alone. They lose to strength, and they win back through betrayal. Years earlier, for political reasons, Abbakka had married a neighboring king, Lakshmapa Arasa. It was never a happy alliance, and she had long since returned to rule Ullal on her own terms, leaving the marriage behind. The Portuguese found him there, nursing his grievance, and they offered him a deal. Help us destroy your wife, and we will help you take more land. He took it. With his knowledge of Ullal's defenses, its routes, its weaknesses, the Portuguese finally had what 40 years of cannon fire had never given them. The battles that followed were brutal, and this time the empire had a map drawn by someone who had once stood beside her. Abbakka was captured at last, and here the documented record goes quiet, the way it so often does for the defeated. She was thrown into a Portuguese prison, and even there, the accounts say, she refused to submit. She rose against her captors one final time and died still fighting, sometime around 1570. Think about what she actually did. For 4 decades, a queen from a small coastal town fought the most powerful empire on the planet to a standstill, with an army of Hindus, Jains, and Muslims who refused to see each other as enemies. She was, by any fair reckoning, one of the first Indians ever to resist European colonialism, and quite possibly the first woman anywhere on the subcontinent to do it. The Rani of Jhansi, who came 300 years later, is remembered by every schoolchild in India. Abbakka is remembered mostly in the folk songs and the shadow plays of the coast that was her home, kept alive not by history books, but by the people who simply refused to let her go. That's the strange injustice this file exists to correct. History doesn't always forget the people who lost. Sometimes it forgets the people who won too early in the wrong place, without anyone powerful left to write it down. Rani Abbakka won. We just stopped telling the story. If stories like this are your thing, real people, impossible odds, every word documented, subscribe, because there's a new file every week. This file is closed. I'll see you in the next one.